Welcome, everybody, to the NFL show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL show is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com, especially the PEMF machine. I am your co-host for the NFL show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
Doing great, Mike. How about you?
All right, and today we're going to talk a little Cleveland Browns football, which you as a Steeler fan and me as a Bengal fan always love to do that, right, Sam?
Hey, it's always worthwhile. There's always something fun to talk about when it's Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and I think when we look at last year, the Cleveland Browns came in as the hot, trendy pick to possibly make it to the Super Bowl. And the highlight of the season was probably scoring on the opening drive. The lowlights were everything after that, Sam.
Pretty much. I mean, they finished season, 6-10. They were getting a lot of betting favorites from Vegas about going to the Super Bowl, winning a lot of games the coming season, and they ended up falling apart. In typical Cleveland Browns fashion, that's kind of how they've always been, at least during the 21st century. I feel like at this point, I know they've added more pieces to this offseason, but I'm still bidding against them to have a losing record because, I mean, they're the Cleveland Browns. What else would you expect?
I actually think more of them than you do, I think. And I think you also, probably the biggest highlight of the season last year was they blew out the Ravens in week 4. At that point, both teams were tied in the AFC North at 2-2. It kind of fell apart from there. We got to see a lot of Baker Mayfield commercials, but probably the biggest incident was the Myles Garrett incident, week 11 on Thursday Night Football. And I think when you looked at this team last year, the coaching was the biggest problem, and especially the lack of discipline the team showed. And I think week 11 of last year on Thursday Night Football against the Steelers really amplified that with Garrett swinging Rudolph's helmet at his head.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about coaching and discipline. There was a lack of maturity on this team, and Freddie Kitchens was not the guy to come in and impose that. Obviously, we all recognize that now. He certainly wasn't the man who was going to come in and fix that team. You mentioned Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett had a couple issues on the field this past year where he injured guys with late hits, or he threw a punch a couple of times. So he had several instances that you might worry you if you're someone in the Browns front office or you're a coach in the organization. And, of course, there's Baker Mayfield's the other one you have to worry about because he came out 22 interceptions, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions, not what you expect from him. And Odell seemed a little bit happy by the end of the season. There was a lot of personalities on this team you have to manage. And obviously Freddie Kitchens and his staff were not the right people to do so.
All right, let's start off at the top with the head coach. And I think there are things to be excited about if you're a Browns fan this year with Kevin Stefanski. I think he's considered one of the best play callers in the NFL. He also spent last year working with Gary Kubiak, who comes from the Mike Shanahan coaching family. And it should come as no surprise that the Vikings led the NFL in outside zone rushing usage last year. And the thing about this, and I think even the best news is the 38-year-old Stefanski will no longer have to yield to the old-school defensive-minded Vikings head coach Mike Zimmer's run-first philosophy. And there could be a chance here for Stefanski to really flourish with this offense because if he wants to run the same kind of offense that he ran in Minnesota, I don't think there's any doubt here that Cleveland has more weapons for him to be able to run what he wants to run than what even the Vikings had.
Oh, yeah. I mean, also Minnesota, you're dealing with the possibility of Dalvin Cook getting hurt week to week. I don't think you have the same issues in Cleveland where you have Nick Chubb. And even if Nick Chubb got hurt, I mean, you've got Kareem Hunt as the backup. Now, obviously, Kareem Hunt, off the field's issues. There's some questions there about whether he should be in the NFL or not. But at the same point, he's on the team. He's with the Browns. He's going to get playing time. And this is a guy who's a former rushing yards leader. So you got him as a backup to Nick Chubb, who's one of the 3 best running backs in the NFL, in my opinion. And you got Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham as your top 2 receivers. And you got 2 starting quality tight ends. I think there's plenty of weapons here in Cleveland. I think Kevin Stefanski, I mean, he's got a lot of toys to play with. I think he'll do a better job than what people are expecting offensively. My question is just whether he can make this team gel. Because right now it's a lot of stars and there's no cohesiveness.
Well, I think there's a comparison here, too. We have Baker Mayfield, who we're going to talk about now, the quarterback, who last year, like you said, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions, was not what everybody expected after a great rookie season. And maybe there's a comparison here a little bit between Sean McVay and when he rescued, a former number 1 overall pick in Jared Goff from Jeff Fisher. It kept him from becoming a bust. And like Goff, when McVay first arrived in L.A., Baker has one of the best supporting casts in football on the offensive side, which means this could be a huge breakout year. What's your take on Mayfield?
Yeah, I think he'll bounce back. I don't know if he'll be as good as he was his rookie season. That was a standout. That was actually a record-breaking year for him as a rookie. He'll certainly do better than what he did last season, though. I don't see getting 20 touchdowns, 21 interceptions again. I don't see him completing under 60% of his pass attempts again. I think he'll do much better, especially because he's got all these weapons. This is his third year in the NFL. My one question is, you've changed coaching staffs. This is your third time now? It's your third season. So there's been a lot of instability around you on this team moving in terms of the leadership, in terms of who you're listening to. So I do think he'll do better. But if he doesn't, you can just point to the coaching staff and say there's been so much instability on that organization. You can't put all the blame for the offensive struggles on Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, but I think the one thing you do have to consider is Kirk Cousins had his best year under Stefanski last year in Minnesota. And the difference between Cousins and Mayfield is this. Cousins can execute the play that Stefanski gives him. Mayfield is the kind of guy that can execute the play, but also on top of that, he can make something happen if something breaks down in that play. And I think this, and you're going to call me crazy, but if I had to pick a dark horse candidate for the 2020 NFL MVP, it would be Baker Mayfield.
Well, you are crazy, but we already knew that going in because you're a Bengals fan. But
right.
It's a but no, I can understand what you're saying, honestly, though. I think Baker Mayfield has more of an X factor than someone like Kirk Cousins. I think his ceiling is higher. I did think he was one of the best quarterbacks coming out of the draft class back in, it was 2018. I thought he was one of the best quarterbacks in that class. I do think he can be successful at NFL level. I think he can be a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. I don't know if he'll ever be a top 10 to 8 kind of guy in the league. I don't know if he'll ever be an MVP, but I think he'll be a productive quarterback. It's just a question of getting that stability in place in an organization that has never been stable in the past 20 years.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, you've got Myles Garrett, who's one of the best defensive ends in the NFL, and now you've got new defensive coordinator Joe Woods. I think the coaching staff in Cleveland is much better than what it was, and I think Woods can amplify Garrett's game even because Woods is coming over from San Francisco and
it looks like Mike got cut off there. Mike got kicked out of the call, I guess. I don't really know what happened. Maybe powering out. But he's talking about Joe Woods, who's the defensive coordinator of Cleveland, and we'll just wait and see when Mike gets back on. I'm going to text him right now. But he's talking about Joe Woods, defensive coordinator in Cleveland, and how he's going to amplify Myles Garrett. I think Myles Garrett is going to be one of the next generational pass rushers in the NFL. He's that kind of good. I'm sorry if I'm just looking down right now. I'm actually texting Mike to see what's going on. But I think Myles Garrett, like I said, is going to be a generational type pass rusher because we've seen it already in the first 3 years of his career. He has that kind of talent. He's right up there, in my opinion, with guys like Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, and there's Mike. Right, he's right up there with guys like Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Neil Hunter, those kind of guys who are the young cores at the defensive end position who are going to be superstars in the future. I think Myles Garrett is a future defensive player of the year candidate. I think he's the kind of guy who will be a dominant pass rusher for the next 10 years in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think a breakout star on that defense could be Carl Joseph. Joseph joined the Browns this season after spending 4 years with the Raiders, with whom he struggled to get it together after being made a first-round pick in 2016. I think Joseph was actually playing really well last year before a foot injury knocked him out of action for the second half of the season. And I think he's another guy who could thrive under Woods.
Yeah, I think Joseph was kind of doomed in Oakland from the start just because the coaching staff when John Gruden kind of came in, it was just all very poor timing for him. Now Oakland has raised Las Vegas at this point, has 3 or 4 good safeties, so he was kind of never going to work out in Oakland. At the same point, though, I think this is a starting caliber safety. You plugged him into a defensive secondary. It's very young. You got Denzel Ward. Grant Delpit was a rookie. Greedy Williams is going to his second year, I believe. I think Carl Joseph is going to be a key back there because he's the most experienced guy who's going to be a starter probably. And I think he will be a playmaker. They won't necessarily have that kind of stability. They won't have the kind of experience back there. I think he'll be an X factor for them in the secondary.
All right, now when you try to pinpoint what caused the downfall of the Browns last year, I think a lot of it, or almost all of it, at least the start of it, has to be the offensive line. When you're making deals to find linemen during the 4th week of the preseason, as the Browns did last year, that's a pretty good indication that you're not a Super Bowl contender. So when Cleveland went out of its way to strengthen that position group, adding Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills, one of the best players in the draft or one of the best linemen in the draft, that solidified the left and right tackle position. It frees them from relying on journeymen and backups to protect Mayfield. And I think that some final pieces must be reconfigured, during training camp. but I think the Bills or the Browns are well ahead of where they were a season ago. And another name I think to keep an eye on is rookie Nick Harris, who could provide great value as a fifth-round depth pick.
Yeah, you talk about the offensive line. That was really the big issue for them last year. They had Greg Robinson was starting at left tackle. And I don't think Greg Robinson's ever been a productive left tackle in the NFL. And then he got arrested over the offseason, so he's out of the league. You had Chris Hubbard starting for you at right tackle several games. He's now a backup player, so that speaks a lot to it. Now your former starters from last year are moving to backup positions. That helps you out quite a bit. Like you said, Nick Harris, that'll be a big help on the interior for depth in case there's any kind of injuries. But they've basically redone this offensive line, and I love what they've done with it. I think Joel Bitonio, who's already been there at left guard, he's one of the best guards in the NFL to begin with. And you're fixed the tackle positions. I think this is going to be a really good offensive line. It's going to give Baker Mayfield enough time to sit back there and make good decisions. But also, I think the biggest factor is going to be it's going to help out the run game even more.
All right. So what do you think about OBJ this year?
Odell is always hard to tell. Let me put it this way. Odell has been less productive over the past 2 seasons than Tyler Boyd, Kenny Galladay. I mean, he's in that kind of class of guys right now. He's no longer that superstar athlete who is going to be the future of the NFL. He's not that kind of player right now. I think this is a guy who will get you maybe 1,100 yards a season, but I don't see him being the superstar he was back in 2014 or 2015.
All right. And defensively, what do you think about replacing Joe Schubert?
That's going to be big for them. I think the linebacking core is my biggest question on this entire team, honestly, at this point. I like Mack Wilson. I do like Mack Wilson. I think he'll be a very productive player in the future for them. But I don't know if you can ever replace Joe Schubert. I don't think you can replace him effectively with the guys you have on your team. I think that's going to be the biggest weakness for them. They got guys like PJ Goods is there, Jacob Phillips, who they drafted. They've got some guys who have potential, but I don't think there's any real starters there. I think it's going to be kind of plug and play, and we'll see who works and who doesn't.
Yeah, I think the interesting one here is the third pick, Jacob Phillips, who was a tackling machine out of LSU. But I think the question remains with Phillips is when you look at him, I don't know if he has the demeanor really to be the guy you stick in the middle of your defense and have him dominate.
Yeah, that's a big concern because it's a big responsibility to go in there and play in the middle and be the guys coordinating everything. And at LSU, you also had someone like Patrick Queen who was next to him. So you had other players who were superstars alongside you. You had a very dominant defensive front. You won't have that same kind of help there in Cleveland. So a guy like Jacob Phillips is being asked to do quite a lot from the very beginning of his career. I just don't know if he's ready to take that step. Like I said, I like Mack Wilson actually a lot right now. He's playing one of their starting linebackers' jobs at this point, but I think he's also got to develop it in pass coverage. So I think there's some concerns here about not only their stars, but also the depth at linebacker for Cleveland.
All right, and I think you got an interesting battle at free safety also. You get second-round pick Grant Delpit out of LSU. Free agent signing Andrew Sadeo or whatever the hell you say there. But when I look at that, I mean, you've got to have somebody step up there to make that secondary to improve it off of last year.
Yeah, and Sadeo is a guy who's been a starter in the past back in Minnesota when they were actually having some of their best defensive units back in like 2017, 2016. Although he really hasn't been a starter the last 2 seasons. I think you don't draft a guy like Grant Delpit that high and then not start him. So I expect Grant Delpit will be the starter despite not having the preseason, despite the shortened offseason. I still think they'll put Grant Delpit out there week 1. And I think I believe in Grant Delpit personally. I think I'm pretty high on him as a draft prospect and what he can do. But at the same point, I wouldn't be shocked if Sendejo eventually takes some snaps from Delpit. I could see him make some mistakes early in his career.
Yeah, and then the running game to me is the big thing. Nick Chubb, almost 1,500 yards rushing last year. You've got Kareem Hunt. So the question is, Stefanski is supposed to be this brilliant play caller, this brilliant offensive mind. How do those 2 guys fit together in the backfield for Stefanski?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult because Nick Chubb, like I said, is one of the 3 best running backs in football, in my opinion. Last year, at almost 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaged 93 rushing yards per game. You can't take a lot of carries away from Nick Chubb. He needs to be getting about 300 carries a year because he's that kind of player. You can't be taking too much from him. On the other end, Kareem Hunt, he played 8 games this past year, only had 43 carries. I think they should run the ball a lot more. I think they honestly should minimize the pass game, see what they have in Baker Mayfield first, make him throw maybe 400 to 450 times this year. Don't put as much emphasis on the pass game, no matter what Odell says or what Jarvis Landry says, and just run the ball. They have an offensive line with Jack Conklin, who's one of the best run blocking right tackles in the game today. Run it. I'm talking about running about maybe, I don't know, run the ball 500 times this year. I legitimately think they could do that, and they'll be successful. So I don't know how the dynamic works. I think Kareem Hunt will be more of a receiving back than a running back necessarily, but I think you could run the ball 450 to 500 times and still have success.
Yeah, and that's going to make it easier on Baker Mayfield also. And a lot of people wondered why they signed Austin Hooper when you already had David Njoku. But the thing about this is Stefanski prefers to run a lot of two tight end sets. As Stefanski's Vikings ran 12 personnel with two tight ends, 34% of their plays last year, second only to the Eagles. So I think the signing of Austin Hooper maybe tells us that they're trying to be more possibly of a run-first team.
Well, yeah, we saw they had Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. this past year in Minnesota, so they definitely using those two tight ends. I think Hooper will be the lead guy. I think Njoku will kind of be the sidekick for now. He's kind of underachieved a little bit. He even requested a trade, but that's obviously not going to happen. And why would you do that if you're Cleveland? There's no point. So I think they're going to prioritize trying to run the ball. I think they're going to utilize those tight ends in a lot of creative ways. I think we could see a new Cleveland Browns team, but at the same point, it's Cleveland. I'm not going to bet on them having a winning season until they actually go out there and do it.
All right. So in closing, are you saying less than 8-8 again? No playoffs for the Browns?
Less than 8-8, no playoffs for the Browns.
When you look at this, Sam, I mean, my problem with this is the Steelers and the Ravens both have significantly better defenses than the Browns. Now, the Browns' offense has the makings to be – I think they're going to be better than the Steelers.
Yeah.
Offensively, I don't think they're going to be better than the Ravens. I don't think they're better than the Bengals. So I think this is a division where if Joe Burrow is the real deal, I mean, all four of these teams could fall between 7-9 and 13-3. And it's going to be a hard division to win. And my question really is depth in the front seven and really linebacker play for the Browns.
Yeah, I don't think they have the linebacker play to keep up with some of these teams. I don't think they could keep up with Baltimore, who's going to run the ball down their throat constantly. And be honest, I know they have Sheldon Richardson and Olivier Vernon up front, but those guys have not been dominant players recently. So I don't know if they have the depth up front to take care of it. I think quarterbacks are going to be huge this year in the AFC North. I mean, we talk about Joe Burrow. He is what we expect him to be. He's going to be a big boost for Cincinnati. We don't know what Big Ben's going to be coming off a season-ending injury, and we don't know what Baker Mayfield's necessarily going to be. It's a lot of question marks. I think we know the Ravens and Steelers have two of the best defenses in the NFL. I think when I look at the teams and predict their records, I'm going to fall back on that. I think those teams will be the best teams in the AFC North because those defenses are so good. And I look at Cleveland's defense, and it's about 2 years away from being relevant.
Man, I think it could be a year if you go the right way, especially with the offense they've got. I think Baker Mayfield has a big season. I think it would not shock me if they're 7-9 to 9-7 with a shot at that extra playoff spot. I think this division is going to be difficult. You're probably going to lose 4 games to the Browns and the Steelers, right, or to the Steelers and the Ravens right there, which is going to make this difficult. You got to play Cincinnati. I mean, it's possible that them and the Bengals are both sitting at 1-5 in the division, which is going to make it really hard to get to the 8 or 9 wins you need to get that last wild card spot.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just don't see Cleveland going out there and be able to beat Pittsburgh, especially have Big Ben there. I don't see them being able to beat Baltimore, even if Lamar takes a step back. I mean, they can just turn around and hang the ball to Mark Ingram 25 times a game. They can probably still beat Cleveland that way. So, to me, I think, yeah, all right, I'm probably hating them a little too much just because they're the Cleveland Browns. I do think they have one of the best offensive sets in the NFL. We're talking about just personnel-wise, probably a top 6 or 7 offense in terms of the weapons they have up there. But like I said, I just don't trust this team is gelled yet. It's a first-year head coach. I think he'll be good long-term. I think he'll actually stick around more than 1 year, but I don't know if I'm going to buy into them year 1.
Yeah, I think really when you look at this, it's 6 to 9 wins for the Browns. But like I said, if Baker Mayfield has a big year, you never know. I just think with this division, I don't think defensively, just like the Bengals, I don't think they're really built to compete with the Ravens and the Steelers. I will give you this, though. I could see them coming in second place because if the Steelers' run game is not up to snuff, you've got an older Big Ben. Offensively, the Browns are a lot better than Pittsburgh, but I would pick them right now for probably third place.
Yeah, it seems about right. I would go with you right there. I think third place is probably fair.
Yeah, because we got the Bengals, the Ravens, and then the Browns and the Steelers.
Oh, yeah, okay, Mike. All right, Mike.
Whatever. What are we doing tomorrow, Sam?
I don't know. Do you want to do a ranking, or do you want to do something historical? Maybe get back to some of those.
It's up to you.
All right, we want to try to do the top 10 deep. I'll try to do top 10 defensive ends of all time.
Top 10 defensive ends of all time. We can do that, and we will do that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Sam, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Sam_Teets33 on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I'm constantly putting out new articles, stats, and polls there all the time, so feel free to go check those out.
All right, you can find me at Grilling Truth, and make sure you check out our sponsor, rcandt.com. The PEMF machine is an amazing machine that if you have any kind of injuries at all, it will help you recover much quicker. If you don't have any injuries and you're old like Sam, it'll help you recover when you wake up in the morning. Make sure you check out rcandt.com. So for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. He's Sam Teets. You've been listening or watching The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.